Imagine for a moment, you live in a world where one company sells absolutely everything. And I don't just mean, books and some electronics.
Yes.
I mean everything.
Yeah.
You need a dress for a wedding, they've got it. A hammer for a project, done. A 100-piece dinner set, no problem.
Okay, that's already sounding pretty comprehensive.
But what if you need the actual lumber, the nails, the shingles, the blueprints to build an entire house? They will pack it all up and ship it directly to your door.
So you're basically describing Amazon on steroids, or like some kind of futuristic mega corporation from a sci-fi movie?
It sounds exactly like Amazon. That is the parallel everyone immediately jumps to.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I told you this company was doing all of this at scale, starting in 1872?
Then you'd be talking about the original everything store. You'd be talking about Montgomery Ward.
That is exactly where we're going today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are unpacking the life, the very slow-motion death, and the very, very strange afterlife of an American icon.
It is a truly fascinating case study. I think for a lot of our listeners, Montgomery Ward is just this faint, dusty memory. Maybe they remember seeing the name in a mall back in the 80s or 90s.
Or they remember their parents or grandparents using that nickname. Monkey Wards.
Monkey Wards, yes! That nostalgia is a huge piece of it. It was just ubiquitous. I mean, the brand was a fixture in American life for over a century, from 1872 all the way to 2001. That's a massive run.
It's a huge run. But when you really dig into the records,
Yeah.
which is what we've done, we've got the corporate history, financial reports, leadership timelines. It's not just a story about another department store that went out of business.
No, not at all. If you look closely, it's a story about the invention of modern retail as we know it. It's a story about a constitutional crisis that involved the U.S. Army physically seizing a company.
Which is just a wild story we'll get to.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And it's also a story about a fatal economic miscalculation that, you could argue, fundamentally changed the entire landscape of the American suburbs.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace the full life cycle of this retail giant. We're going from the invention of the mail order business, which was, the internet before the internet, to that dramatic movie-like showdown during World War II, to the post-war mistake that sealed their fate, and finally, to where they are now, which is, well, it's complicated.
It's very complicated. We are looking at a classic zombie brand situation.
A zombie brand. I love that term. But before we get to the zombies, we have to start at the birth. So let's rewind the clock. It's 1872. We're in Chicago. A man named Aaron Montgomery Ward. What's the vibe here?
The vibe is 100% startup. Pure and simple. We tend to think of the 19th century as being, dusty and slow and old-timey.
Right, separated from us by all those sepia-toned photos.
Exactly. But Chicago in 1872 was anything but slow. It was this period of rapid, almost chaotic disruption. The city was literally rising from the ashes of the Great Fire of 1871. It was a hub of energy, of capital, of new ideas. And Aaron Montgomery Ward, he was a guy who saw a very specific problem.
And what was the problem he was trying to solve?
Well, he'd spent years as a traveling salesman for other companies. He was out in the rural Midwest talking to farmers, and he realized that the rural customer was getting an absolutely raw deal.
How so?
It was about isolation. If you lived on a farm in 1872, you couldn't just hop in your car and drive to a mall. You were at the total mercy of the local general store. And because that store had a monopoly, the owner could charge whatever they wanted. The selection was awful, the prices were sky high, and often you had to buy on credit.
So they kept you in debt.
It was an economic trap. Ward saw this. He also saw the rise of the Grange movement. These were organizations of farmers banding together to fight against monopolies, especially the railroads and middlemen. He saw this organized, frustrated customer base and had a radical idea.
Okay, what was it?
He thought, what if I can sell directly to these people? What if I can cut out the middleman, bypass the general store entirely, and ship goods straight from the manufacturer to the farmer for cash?
That sounds incredibly modern. That's literally the direct-to-consumer, the DTC model we talk about today with brands like Warby Parker or Casper mattresses.
It is the exact same principle. Cut out the middleman to lower the price and increase the selection. But, doing it in 1872 required a completely different kind of infrastructure and a whole lot of trust.
Right, and the actual founding story is a little... The records are a bit conflicting, which I think adds to the mythos of it. I saw some sources say his first office was just a single room on North Clark Street.
Right. Very humble. Just a desk and a chair, basically.
But the other story, the other location mentioned, is in a loft above a livery stable on Kinsey Street.
A livery stable. I love that detail. It's so much more romantic.
It paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it?
It really does. You can just imagine the smell of the horses downstairs, the sound of hooves on cobblestone, the dust. And up in this loft, you have Aaron Montgomery Ward and maybe one or two partners trying to launch a retail revolution.
It is the 1872 version of Steve Jobs and Wozniak in the garage.
It absolutely is. And their first product wasn't a fancy computer. It was a single sheet of paper.
A single sheet. Not even a booklet.
The very first catalog was just a price list on a single sheet of paper, listing the goods he could get and their prices. But it promised something truly revolutionary, something that built the whole enterprise.
Satisfaction guaranteed or your money back.
That was the magic phrase.
We take that completely for granted now. But back then,
It was unheard of. It was a world of caveat emptor, buyer beware. You bought something, it was your problem. Ward introduced trust into a trustless system. He was telling these deeply skeptical farmers, send me your cash, real cash through the mail, and if you don't like what I send you, I promise I will send your money back. That was the key that unlocked the entire mail order business.
and once that trust was established, the scaling was. It was just insane. We have some numbers here that are just mind-blowing for a pre-computer, pre-logistics software era.
The growth curve is basically a vertical line.
So by 1883, that's just 11 years after starting in that stable, the catalog is already 240 pages long, and it lists 10,000 different items.
10,000 items. Just stop and think about the logistics of that in 1883. You don't have an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have inventory management software. You don't have barcodes or scanners. You have ledgers, pens, and human brains.
And you have to physically source 10,000 unique things. Everything from sewing needles to farm plows. Get an artist to draw an engraving of it, write a description, set a price, and then actually have it in a warehouse ready to ship when an order comes in from, say, rural Kansas.
It's an operational miracle. It really is.
But wait, here's the stat that just made me stop and reread the source material.
Yeah.
We fast forward to 1904.
Okay, turn of the century.
In 1904, Montgomery Ward is mailing out 3 million catalogs.
3 million.
And each of these catalogs weighs 4 pounds. That's about 1.8 kilograms. 4 pounds.
Whoa. Okay, let's just do the math on that because the number is hard to even comprehend.
I did the math.
3 million catalogs at 4 pounds each.
That is 12 million pounds of paper.
12 million pounds of paper moving through the U.S. postal system. That's 6,000 tons.
Think about the number of train cars you would need just to move that paper. Think about the rural post offices. You have a tiny post office in a small town in Nebraska, and suddenly thousands of these 4-pound bricks arrive for delivery. It must have completely overwhelmed the system.
It was an information overload, but a physical one. And you have to understand, for the person receiving it, that catalog was the internet. It was their connection to the wider world. They famously called it the wish book or the dream book. The whole family would gather around it at night by the fire. It wasn't just about buying things. It was about dreaming. You could flip through the pages and see what the latest fashions were in New York or even Paris. You could see new technologies, new tools you didn't even know existed. It brought the entire global marketplace right to your farmhouse doorstep.
That's a really powerful image, the wish book. It really drives home how emotional the connection to that brand was. It wasn't just a store. It was a lifeline to modernity.
Absolutely. But as with any massive success, you can't stay the king of the hill forever. You invite competition. And we have to talk about the rivalry.
The great rivalry. You can't tell the story of Ward without talking about the other guy.
Richard Warren Sears.
Enter the challenger.
Yeah.
Sears gets into the general catalog game in 1896, and almost immediately it becomes this clash of the titans.
It's really interesting to compare their styles. Aaron Montgomery Ward was seen as more dignified, the satisfaction guaranteed pioneer. Richard Sears, he was a showman. He was a born promoter. His copywriting was more aggressive, more sensational.
And the numbers show just how tight this race became and how fast. By 1900, it's only 4 years after Sears launched his big catalog. Montgomery Ward had sales of $8.7 million, which is a huge number.
Massive for 1900, an absolute behemoth.
But Sears had $10 million.
So in just 4 years, Sears had already caught up and edged slightly ahead. They were neck and neck from the get-go. And this rivalry, Ward versus Sears, It basically defined the entire 20th century retail landscape.
Hmm.
It is the original great American business rivalry. It's Coke versus Pepsi. It's Apple versus Microsoft.
And families would take sides,
Right.
right?
Oh, absolutely. You were a Sears family or you were a Ward family. It was part of your identity. You trusted one wish book over the other.
And this incredible growth, this intense rivalry,
Mhm.
it required a massive physical footprint. We can't just talk about the catalog. We have to talk about the buildings. In 1908, Ward opens the Montgomery Ward & Co. catalog house in Chicago.
The catalog house, even the name sounds monumental.
It was. It was a 1.25 million square foot building. It stretched for blocks along the Chicago River.
And it wasn't just a functional warehouse, it was an architectural statement. It had this prominent tower. It had a statue on top called the Spirit of Progress. It was a monument telling the world, we are here, we are permanent.
And they didn't just stop in Chicago. They started building these giant distribution centers all over the country.
They built these concrete fortresses, Baltimore, Fort Worth, Kansas City, Portland, St. Paul. The list goes on. And the sources note that in many of these cities, the Montgomery Ward building was the largest industrial structure in the entire city at the time it was built.
So they were the skyscrapers of their day, but instead of offices, they were just packed to the rafters with goods.
They were the physical manifestation of their logistical dominance. You can think of them like the Amazon fulfillment centers of today, but they were built out of reinforced concrete to last 1,000 years. In fact, many of them are still standing today, repurposed as condos or offices. Because they're so well built, you basically can't tear them down.
So, okay, we've got this mail-order empire, these colossal buildings, millions of catalogs, millions in sales. They are the absolute kings of the logistics game. But then we get to the 1920s. And the source material frames this as the pivot.
This is a really crucial moment, a major strategic decision. Up until 1926, Montgomery Ward is mail order only. That is their entire identity. They do not have stores. You can't just walk in and buy a dress off a rack.
Which seems so weird to think about now because my entire memory of them is as a physical store in a mall.
Exactly. But for their first 50-plus years, they were purely remote. But in the 1920s, the world started to change in a fundamental way.
The automobile.
The Ford Model T. All of a sudden, that rural farmer isn't trapped on the farm anymore. He can get in his car and drive to the nearest city. He can shop. The old general store monopoly that Ward was built to fight was now being broken by the automobile.
So Ward's leadership realizes they have to go where the people are now going. They have to open physical retail stores.
In 1926, they break with a half-century of tradition. They open their very first retail outlet store in Plymouth, Indiana.
And this wasn't a slow, let's dip our toe in the water kind of rollout.
Yes.
This was a full-on blitz.
Aggressive doesn't even begin to describe it. Listen to this growth curve. They have one store in 1926. By 1928, just 2 years later, they have 244 stores.
Wow, 244. That's opening a new store roughly every 3 days for 2 years straight.
And they're not done. By 1929, 531 stores.
They went from 0 retail stores to 531 in 3 years.
Think about the operational strain of that. It's just mind-boggling. You have to find the real estate in over 500 different towns. You have to negotiate and sign the leases. You have to hire store managers, hire clerks, train them. You have to stock all the shelves. You have to completely re-engineer your distribution network from a ship-to-customer model to a ship-to-store model.
And again, you have to do all of that without computers, without any modern communication tools.
It was an incredibly high-risk, high-speed pivot.
High risk, and as it turns out, just terrible timing.
The worst possible timing in American history.
Because what happens in late 1929?
The stock market crashes, the Great Depression begins.
So they have just massively overextended themselves, spent all this capital opening hundreds of stores, and suddenly their customers have no money.
It was a catastrophe. By 1930, Ward is struggling badly. They're bleeding cash. And interestingly, the sources note that in 1930, they actually decline a merger offer from their rival Sears.
Wow. Imagine that alternative history for a second. A combined Sears-Ward monopoly heading into the Depression.
It would have been a colossus. We'll come back to that idea later, but in 1930, they say no. They want to try and go it alone, but the investors are panicking. The stock price is in the tank. So J.P. Morgan Jr., yes, the son of that J.P. Morgan, intervenes.
When a Morgan gets directly involved, you know things are serious.
The heavy hitters are now calling the shots, and they decide the current leadership team isn't cutting it. They need a fixer. They need a tough guy to come in and turn the ship around.
And that's when Sewell Avery enters the picture.
Sewell Avery. This name is going to become very, very important to our story.
Describe him for us. What kind of person are we talking about here?
He is a serious man. He came from the U.S. Gypsum Corporation, that's building materials. He wasn't a retailer by trade. He was a ruthless numbers guy. He was known for being stern, conservative, disciplined, and very autocratic. He believed in top-down control.
So he takes over as president in 1931. What are his first moves?
He does exactly what you'd expect a fixer to do. He cuts the fat. He starts closing the unprofitable new stores. He fires staff to slash payroll. But he also makes a really brilliant observation about the business itself. He realizes that the company is trying to run its new stores like they're pages in a catalog.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the store managers were all catalog guys. They knew logistics, they knew inventory, but they didn't understand things like visual merchandising or customer service or how to lay out a store to encourage browsing. So Avery fires the catalog guys from the stores and hires actual experienced store managers.
That seems like such common sense, but I guess when you're in the middle of a massive chaotic pivot, you can miss the obvious.
Exactly. He professionalized the retail side of the business, he brought in discipline, and it worked.
It really did. The records show they were profitable again before the end of the 1930s, right in the middle of the Depression.
This is the era that cemented the image of the Montgomery Ward store for a generation. The green awning stores. If you look at photos from the late 30s, you see these tidy storefronts with distinctive green awnings dotting main streets all across America. Thanks to Avery, by the end of the decade, Montgomery Ward is the country's largest retailer.
So at this point in the story, Sewell Avery is the hero.
Absolutely. He's the man who saved the company from the Great Depression. He's the king of retail. He can do no wrong.
But then the 1940s happen. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn from a business case study into more of a political thriller.
This is Section 3, the showdown, the government seizure.
I have to say, I was genuinely shocked by this part of the research. I had no idea this ever happened.
It's one of the most dramatic confrontations between a corporation and the U.S. government in history, and yet people have almost completely forgotten about it today.
So set the scene for us. It's 1944. The country is in the thick of World War II.
Right. The entire U.S. economy is mobilized for the war effort. Factories are churning out tanks and planes. Labor is tight. And the government has set up a body called the War Labor Board, specifically to prevent strikes, because a strike means stopped production, and stopped production hurts the war effort.
And what's going on at Montgomery Ward at this time?
There's a massive labor dispute, a nationwide strike involving about 12,000 workers. They want better wages, and they want the company to recognize their union.
And the War Labor Board steps in to mediate.
They do more than mediate. They order Sewell Avery to settle the strike. They tell him, you need to recognize the union, you need to extend the workers' contract, the country needs its goods distribution network running smoothly for morale and for the economy.
And Avery, the man who saved the company by being tough and unyielding.
He does what he always does. He digs in his heels. He flat out refuses.
He just says no to the federal government during wartime.
He defies them. His argument was that Montgomery Ward was not a war industry. He basically said, we sell clothes and furniture. We don't make bullets. The government doesn't have the authority to tell me how to run my business.
He is throwing down the gauntlet and challenging the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
He is. And FDR, especially in 1944, was not a man you wanted to challenge. He saw this as a threat to his authority and to the war effort.
So what happened next?
The president did not blink. In April of 1944, FDR issued Executive Order 9438. He cited the War Labor Disputes Act and his powers as commander-in-chief, and he ordered the Secretary of War to seize all Montgomery Ward properties nationwide.
Seize the company. That sounds so abstract, but this was not an abstract event.
Not at all. It was incredibly physical and dramatic. U.S. Army troops, we're talking actual soldiers in uniform with helmets and rifles, marched into the Chicago headquarters of Montgomery Ward.
Can you just imagine being an employee there? You're sitting at your desk, you're typing up an invoice for a sofa, and suddenly a platoon of soldiers walks into your office building.
And they march straight up to the executive suite, to Sewell Avery's office. The Attorney General of the United States is with them.
And Avery still refuses to comply. He still won't leave.
He sits calmly at his desk and refuses to budge. According to the reports, he told the Attorney General, to hell with the government. He was going to force them to physically remove him.
So what did the soldiers do?
They picked him up, literally. There's an incredibly famous photograph of this. It was on the cover of newspapers all over the country. Two soldiers are holding Sewell Avery in the air by his arms and legs, carrying him out of his office like he's a piece of furniture.
I've seen that photo. his face.
He looks so dignified, but absolutely furious. He's wearing this pristine suit and tie, and he's just staring at the camera with this look of pure contempt. They carried the CEO of America's largest retailer out of his own building and essentially dumped him on the sidewalk.
That is just unbelievable. It's such a perfect symbol of that clash between corporate autonomy and government power during a national emergency.
It became a massive political scandal. Conservatives and business leaders saw Avery as a martyr for private property rights. Liberals and union supporters saw him as an arrogant traitor who was obstructing the war effort. It immediately went to the courts.
And how did it all get resolved in the end?
Well, ultimately, the war ended. In 1945, with the national emergency over, President Truman ended the seizure of the company. The Supreme Court case that was pending was dismissed as moot because the government had already given the property back. Sewell Avery walked right back into his office and took control again.
So in a way, he won. He outlasted the government.
Got his company back, yes. But here is the critical twist in the story. The trauma of that event, or perhaps just his own deepening pessimism, it set the stage for the next and most disastrous chapter of the company.
Section 4, the fatal miscalculation.
This is the real tragedy. If the government seizure was the climax of the movie, this is the tragic downfall of the main character.
So Avery is back in charge. It's 1945. The war is over. The GIs are coming home. The general mood in America is one of relief, right?
Yeah.
And optimism.
The post-war boom is just starting to bubble up, but that is not what Sewell Avery saw.
What was his prediction for the post-war economy?
He looked at history. He looked at the recession that happened after World War I. He looked at the Great Depression that he had just so brilliantly navigated. And he became convinced, absolutely 100% convinced, that the post-war economic boom was a temporary illusion. He believed the U.S. was about to fall back into a massive, crippling depression.
Now, to be fair to him, he wasn't the only economist or business leader who feared that. It was a common concern.
It was a concern, yes. But his reaction to that fear was extreme and total.
What was his strategy then to prepare for this coming depression?
One phrase: hoard cash. He decided to freeze the company in time. The goal was to preserve liquidity above all else. He thought, when the inevitable crash comes, Sears will go bankrupt, JCPenney will go bankrupt, and I will be the only one sitting on a mountain of cash. I will buy all of my competitors for pennies on the dollar.
That's an incredibly bold, contrarian bet on the future of the American economy.
It's the kind of strategy that makes you look like an absolute genius if you're right, and an absolute fool if you're wrong.
And how strictly did he enforce this company-wide freeze?
It was draconian. The rule was no new stores, period.
None at all.
Zero. At the very moment that the American suburbs are being born, while Levittown is going up, while the baby boom is starting and families are moving out of the cities, Montgomery Ward builds 0 new stores to serve them.
That's stunning. And what about the stores they already had?
This is the detail that really stuck with me from the source material. He did not even permit his managers to spend money on paint.
He wouldn't let them paint the walls of the stores.
No paint, no new light fixtures, no renovations. He effectively ordered his company to let its stores rot from the inside out.
So just try to imagine the customer experience in, say, 1950. You walk into a Montgomery Ward.
It looks exactly like it did in 1935. It's dingy. The paint is literally peeling off the walls. The lighting is bad. It feels old. It feels tired. It feels depressing.
And then you get in your car and you drive 5 minutes down the road to the brand new suburban shopping center.
And there is a brand new Sears. And it's bright, and it's modern, and it's well-stocked with the latest goods. And most importantly, it's right there in the middle of the new suburb where you and all your neighbors live.
It's a complete no-brainer for the consumer.
It was a slaughter. Sears snapped up all the prime real estate locations in the new booming suburbs. They captured the loyalty of an entire new generation of American families. And Montgomery Ward just sat on its pile of cash, getting older and sadder, waiting for a depression that never came.
The source material puts it so bluntly. A conservative strategy became a death sentence in a booming economy.
That's the perfect summary. Avery had brilliantly prepared for an economic winter, but what America got was an endless summer.
At some point, the shareholders must have revolted against this.
They did, but it took a shockingly long time. It wasn't until 1955.
That's a full decade after the war ended.
A completely lost decade. And in the world of retail, you cannot afford to lose a decade and survive. The damage is permanent.
So in 1955, an activist investor named Louis Wolfson launched a high-profile proxy fight.
A proxy fight is basically when an outsider tries to convince all the other shareholders to vote with him to kick out the current board of directors. It was a nasty, very public battle. Wolfson just pointed to the obvious. Ward was dying on the vine while Sears was conquering the world.
And he won.
Well, he didn't get full control, but he put enough pressure on the board that the aging Sewell Avery was finally forced to resign. The king was dethroned.
But the damage was already done.
Oh, it was irreversible. Sears had all the best locations. Ward had a pile of cash, but nowhere to put it. They were now and would forever be a second-tier player.
So this ushers in the struggle for identity era. Section 5, the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
This whole period is just painful to watch if you're a student of business strategy. It's basically 3 decades of flailing. They're just trying everything they can think of to catch up.
In 1961, they bring in a new president, Robert Elton Brooker.
And you'll never guess where they found him.
He was a former vice president and board member at Sears.
Of course, the classic, if you can't beat 'em, hire 'em strategy.
And he brought a bunch of Sears managers with him. They tried to streamline the company, make it more efficient.
The source notes mention some pretty drastic cuts. They slashed the number of suppliers they used from 15,000 down to 7,000. They cut the number of different brands they carried from 168 down to just 16.
So they were trying to be more efficient, focusing on their own private label goods.
And it helped the bottom line for a little while, but it didn't solve the fundamental problem, which was nobody knew what Montgomery Ward was anymore. Were they a high-end store? A discount store? A rural store? A suburban store? They had no clear identity.
And then the corporate weirdness really begins. The mergers.
In 1968, they merged with the Container Corporation of America
A company that makes cardboard boxes.
to form a new entity called Marcor.
Marcor. It sounds like the name of a villain's company in a James Bond movie.
It really does. It was a classic conglomerate. The idea in that era was to smooth out the business cycles of different industries. But it gets even stranger. In 1974, a very, very big fish enters the pond.
Mobil Oil.
Yes, the company with the gas stations and the flying red horse.
Okay, I have to stop you here because this makes no sense on the surface. Why on earth would an oil company want to own a struggling department store?
You have to put yourself in the context of the mid-1970s, the oil crisis. Oil prices were going through the roof. Mobil was absolutely drowning in cash. But they were also worried. They thought, maybe the oil era is ending. Maybe the government will break us up for being a monopoly. We need to diversify our assets.
So they went shopping for a non-oil business.
They wanted to buy a big, established American company that was completely different from oil, and they landed on Marcor. By 1976, Mobil owned Montgomery Ward outright.
It just feels like such a mismatch. The skill set required to sell gasoline and the skill set required to sell bed sheets feel very, very different.
It was a massive culture clash. The oil executives in their New York headquarters just did not understand the rhythms of retail. They didn't understand fashion cycles or the importance of the Christmas rush.
But to their credit, under Mobil's ownership, they did try some innovative things. I was really interested in this home computer project I found in the notes.
Ah, the CyberVision 2001.
Yes. The year is 1978.
This is extremely early in the home computer game. This is just a year after the Apple II and the Commodore PET came out. And Montgomery Ward decides they're going to sell a home computer under their own brand name.
The CyberVision. It sounds so futuristic.
And it was, for the time. It connected to your television set. It used cassette tapes to load data and programs.
But it failed.
It was a total failure. There were manufacturing problems with the company they partnered with. And frankly, the idea of buying a computer from a department store catalog was a really hard sell when specialized computer stores were starting to pop up. They pulled the plug by the early 80s.
But it shows they were at least trying. They weren't completely asleep at the wheel.
They were trying to find that next big thing that would save them.
And they also tried to pivot hard into the discount market with this Jefferson Ward experiment.
This is another one of the great heartbreaks of their late history. By 1980, Mobil's management realizes that the traditional Ward stores are just bleeding money. But they look at the market and see who's winning.
The discounters. Kmart was huge. And this new cool player called Target was on the rise.
Exactly. Target was the upscale discounter. So Mobil looks at its portfolio of assets and realizes they own this small, successful discount chain in Florida called Jefferson Stores. And they have a light bulb moment. Aha! We will rebrand our worst-performing Montgomery Ward stores as Jefferson Ward. We'll become the next Target.
On paper, that sounds like a pretty decent plan.
It wasn't a terrible idea, but the execution.
Execution is everything in retail.
They tried to expand way too fast. They decided to convert about a third of all Montgomery Ward stores into Jefferson Ward stores almost overnight.
And the staff just couldn't handle that kind of rapid change.
The management team from the small Florida chain was completely overwhelmed. They didn't understand the northern markets. The source material notes that the buyers in the north didn't understand the southern markets. They were stocking things that sold well in Miami in stores in Minneapolis in the middle of winter.
So they had, like, swimsuits for sale during a blizzard.
Essentially, the inventory mix was all wrong, the logistics broke down, and this idea that was supposed to be their savior turned into a massive cash drain that was dragging down the whole company.
And the final outcome.
They gave up and sold the entire Jefferson Ward chain to another retailer, Bradley's, in 1985. It was another high-profile, expensive, failed pivot.
And speaking of endings, 1985 is also the year the catalog died.
The 113-year-old catalog, the wish book, the very thing that started the entire company. They shut it down.
Why would they do that?
The official reason was that they wanted to focus all their energy on creating these boutique-like specialty stores. They saw the catalog as an anchor to their rural past. They wanted to be modern and suburban.
It just feels like they're throwing things at the wall at this point. Let's be Target. Now let's be a collection of boutiques. No, let's sell computers.
It is the perfect definition of a company that has lost its soul. They are completely reactive, not proactive. They're just chasing everyone else's tail instead of figuring out who they are.
And Mobil eventually just got tired of throwing good money after bad.
By 1988, Mobil wanted out. The great diversification strategy of the 70s was a bust. They wanted to go back to just being an oil company.
So they spun it off in a leveraged buyout.
A massive $3.8 billion deal. The management team at the time, led by a man named Bernard Brennan, bought the company back from Mobil. Montgomery Ward was independent once again.
So we're heading into the 1990s. The company is independent again. But is it healthy?
No. It's on life support, and the world around it is getting much, much more competitive.
This brings us to Section 6, the slow decline and death.
The retail landscape of the 90s was just brutal. You had the unstoppable rise of the category killers.
Stores like Best Buy for electronics, Toys R Us for toys, Home Depot for hardware.
Exactly. If you wanted a specific thing, like a television, you went to Best Buy because they had the best selection and prices. If you wanted a hammer, you went to Home Depot. Why would you ever go to Montgomery Ward for those things?
And for general merchandise, you had the planet-killing juggernaut that was Walmart.
And on the other end, Target had successfully captured the cheap but stylish demographic. Montgomery Ward was squeezed to death in the middle. It was seen as your grandparents' store. It wasn't cheap enough to compete with Walmart, it wasn't cool enough to compete with Target, and it didn't have the deep selection of the category killers.
So the erosion of their traditional customer base was just steady and unavoidable.
In 1997, the inevitable happened. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
Bankruptcy number 1. This is usually the beginning of the end.
They tried a massive restructuring. They emerged from that first bankruptcy in 1999, but now they were a wholly owned subsidiary of GE Capital.
GE Capital, so another massive non-retail conglomerate owner.
GE was their biggest creditor during the bankruptcy, so they essentially took ownership of the company in exchange for the debt that was owed to them.
And they tried one last desperate pivot, the Great Ward's rebrand.
That's right. They dropped the Montgomery. They were just Wards. They got a new, modern logo.
And they had that store-within-a-store concept, Electric Avenue.
Yes. They tried to make their electronics department look and feel just like a Best Buy inside the larger store. They used flashy neon signs and more open layouts. They spent millions and millions of dollars renovating stores to make them look more consumer-friendly.
It was a final, last-ditch effort to become relevant again.
It really was. They were trying to spend their way out of irrelevance.
But then comes Christmas of 2000.
The ghost of Christmas past.
The entire retail sector lives and dies by the sales numbers in the fourth quarter.
And the holiday sales numbers for Wards came in, and they were soft. They were much lower than anyone had expected.
And GE Capital was watching closely.
GE Capital is a finance company. They look at spreadsheets. They don't have an emotional attachment to retail. They had promised to keep funding the restructuring, but when they saw those poor Christmas results, they just did the math. They realized it would take hundreds of millions more dollars to even have a chance of saving the ship.
So they decided to cut their losses and let it sink.
They reneged on their promises of future support. They pulled the plug.
The announcement came on December 28th, 2000.
Just think about that timing. 2 days after Christmas. Imagine being an employee. You've just worked through the insane holiday rush, you're exhausted, and then the announcement comes down from corporate.
Cease all operations.
Effective immediately, full liquidation.
The human toll was just massive.
250 stores closed, 37,000 employees were laid off.
37,000 people. That's the population of a decent-sized American city, all out of a job at once.
It was a true corporate tragedy, and it really highlights the danger of that last-ditch effort. Sometimes, by the time you spend all the money to finally fix the stores, to finally paint the walls that Sewell Avery refused to paint 50 years earlier, your customer has already moved on and they're never coming back.
So 2001, the liquidation sales happen, everything must go. The fixtures are sold off, the signs come down, the buildings go dark. End of story.
But the name didn't die.
And this brings us to our final and maybe weirdest section, the zombie brand.
This is such a strange future of modern commerce. A corporation can die, its buildings can be torn down, its employees can move on, but its name, its intellectual property, that can live on forever.
Because that name recognition still has value. People remember it.
Exactly. Even if you hadn't shopped at a Montgomery Ward in 10 years, you knew the name. It had a century of built-in trust associated with it.
So who bought the corpse?
In 2004, a direct mail company called Direct Marketing Services, Inc., or DMSI, bought the intellectual property, the name, the logo, the customer lists.
And what did they do with it?
And the irony here is just so rich, it's almost unbelievable. They pivoted the brand back to an online and catalog-based operation.
No way. They went back to the roots.
They went right back to the beginning. No expensive physical stores, just a website and a mail order catalog. They realized the only real value left in the brand was in that original direct-to-consumer model.
But there was a big catch, right? This wasn't really Montgomery Ward coming back from the dead.
A huge catch. The new owners were very explicit in stating that they did not honor any obligations from the old company.
So if I found an old gift card from 1999 in my sock drawer,
It was a worthless piece of plastic.
what if I had a lifetime guarantee on a Craftsman-style tool I bought there in 1985?
The guarantee was void. The lifetime referred to the lifetime of the original company, not your lifetime. And that company was dead.
That's so eerie. It's like the brand is wearing a skin suit of the old company.
It is a zombie. It looks and sounds like your old friend, but there's no soul behind the eyes. It's just an empty vessel.
And the zombie kept shambling on.
It did. DMSI itself went to auction in 2008, and the Montgomery Ward brand was purchased by Swiss Colony.
Swiss Colony. Aren't they the people who sell cheese logs and sausages in catalogs at Christmas?
The very same. They're masters of the direct mail business. They know that world better than anyone. They saw the value in the Ward brand and its mailing lists.
So they relaunched it again.
They relaunched the website in September of 2008. They started mailing out new Montgomery Ward catalogs in 2009.
And where are they today?
Today, the brand is owned by Swiss Colony's parent company, Colony Brands. You can go to wards.com right now. You can buy furniture, electronics, kitchen gadgets. They have an installment payment plan.
I saw they have their own house brand of kitchenware, chef-tested.
They do. And here is the ultimate final irony. You can find Montgomery Ward branded products for sale on Amazon.
Wow. That brings it completely full circle. The company that was the original everything store is now just another third-party seller on the modern everything store.
It's the final destination of the disrupted. If you can't beat them, you become a feature on the platform that replaced you.
What a wild ride. From a loft above a livery stable in Chicago, to a 4-pound wish book, to a showdown with FDR, to the mobile oil boardroom, and finally to a zombie website selling air fryers on Amazon.
The story of Montgomery Ward is basically the entire history of American consumerism wrapped up in the timeline of one company.
So let's unpack this. Let's step back. What does it all mean? Why should you, our listener, care about a department store that died more than 20 years ago?
I think it matters because it's a powerful lesson that breaks the illusion of invincibility. In its day, Montgomery Ward was the biggest. They were the original innovator. For decades, they seemed absolutely untouchable.
And they still died.
They died because of one catastrophic, decade-long strategic mistake. The final decline was long and slow, but the mortal wound was self-inflicted in 1945 by Sewell Avery's refusal to adapt.
It makes you realize that sometimes playing it safe can be the absolute most dangerous move a company can make.
Exactly. You cannot save your way to success in a growth market. Sometimes you just have to paint the store. You have to build the new location where the customers are.
And I can't help but keep coming back to that what-if scenario you mentioned earlier, that merger offer in 1930.
The Sears Ward super
Yeah.
company.
If they had merged back then, they would have had incredible scale and power. Do you think they would have survived the rise of Walmart and Amazon?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If they had merged, they would have had the resources to maybe fight off Walmart in the 70s and 80s, or maybe they would have just been a bigger, slower target.
The bigger dinosaur for the asteroid to hit.
Merging two companies that are both struggling to adapt to a new reality usually just creates a larger, more dysfunctional company that struggles to adapt. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, and if the culture at the top was don't innovate, hoard cash, a merger wouldn't have fixed that fundamental problem.
That's a really profound thought. Scale doesn't guarantee survival. Adaptability is what guarantees survival.
Precisely.
So here's our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We all look at the giants of today. We look at Amazon, at Google, at Walmart. They seem eternal. They seem like they will be here 100 years from now.
Just like Montgomery Ward seemed to a farmer looking through the wish book in 1930.
So as you look at today's corporate landscape, ask yourself this. Who is the Sewell Avery of today? Which giant tech company or retailer is sitting on a massive pile of cash, getting complacent and refusing to paint the store? Who is playing defense while the next great disruption is being quietly born in a garage or maybe a modern-day livery stable somewhere?
That's the question to keep asking.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the incredible rise and the tragic fall of Montgomery Ward. We'll be back next time with another stack of sources and another fascinating story.
Keep looking for the patterns. See you next time.